Okay, we're going to cut the tenons on the table saw on a dado blade today. If you have another method that you prefer, that's fine. This is what we have available today. But one warning, one word of caution about using the dado head and doing this operation. This is the traditional dado blade insert for the throat plate for the table saw. But this is a way too big of a hole here. So if you were to use that here in this instance, this whole piece would just fall right into that. So don't do that. You're much better off doing a zero clearance like we have here. That's far safer. So keep that in mind. I'm going to put this aside. And I'm going to pick up my piece and put it in place. And we're going to make the first cheek cut along the sides here, along right here. That's what we're going to do first. And keep in mind what I work off center, so take a little time to set it up right, because we're going to cut from one side, turn it over, and cut the other side. And in the end, what we should have, well, we'll definitely have it dead centered. What we need to do is work it back and forth until we get the exact dimension, the exact thickness. So let's turn it on, and I've already set this one up. I'm going to turn it over, and we're going to do that again to get the other cheek. But we need to get these cuts here yet, so we're going to change this block out to a thicker piece so we can do that, and then we'll get to those cheeks. Okay, now we're set up to cut the width of the tenon. And we've got a wider block on here for backup, and we're going to put it in place. And again, do some test cuts before you do that. We've done that off camera and we're already ready to go. You're going to turn it over after you get done and you're centered. And you should have the right width of tenon in the end. There's our tenon. You do want to, all along this procedure, you do want to take your leg and check it with the mortise to make sure that you're still on track. And do this, this is the wide rail. You've got a narrow rail too. It's the same thing with the narrow rail as we did here, just narrower piece. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to tear this setup down, and we're going to come back and we're going to put a bevel on the end of this tenon, because these tenons meet inside the mortise and we need clearance. Okay, like I said, we're going to put a bevel on the tenon here so it meets when it goes into the its mortise, because we're going to have the other one coming in at the same place. One thing to keep in mind is which direction you bevel this, because that's going to determine the face. So if you've got something you want to bury, or you've got a nice face you want to expose, keep that in mind when you're orienting this cut. So now we're going to go ahead, and I've got the stop set. I'm just going to run this through once, turn it over, and run it again, and we should get a nice bevel, 45 degrees on each end. I'm going to turn it over, keeping the same orientation, and run it again. Okay, now that you've got this one beveled on both ends, go ahead and do that to all of them. The short one, the narrow ones, short ones, long ones, they all get the same thing. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to punch these little square holes that relate to the auxiliary posts that connect the two the narrow and the wider rails. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to punch these 3/16 square holes that appear to pin in the auxiliary posts. And again, we're going to use a twist bit instead of the called for brad point bit. And I have marked a red line there for stopping, And again, this is a longer bit too. This is not your standard size bit, so you'll have to find a longer bit to go along with the 3/16. It won't be long enough. And I should mention the bit is 3/64 under the given size, so it's 3/64 under 3/16. So it's basically the same thing as we've done before. I'm going to square it up and center it on my crosshairs and then punch and drill down to the line. We're going in about 3/8 of an inch. Now I'm going to continue to punch and wiggle as I go down, because that's going to help it come back out without a lot of struggle. That should be good enough. And as before, I'm going to drill one more time and pull out all the crud that I've created in there, but not going down as deep as I did before. Just enough you can feel it stop, and you've pulled out all the crud. And wiggle it just a little bit, and we've got our square hole. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to drill a dowel hole through the narrow and the wider rails for the auxiliary post. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and drill the holes for the auxiliary post, the 1/4 inch dowel. Beware that the long rails and the short rails have a distance that's different coming in from the shoulder. We're taking these measurements from the shoulder and not from the end of the tenon. So beware of that. And actually this distance ends for the dowel is exactly the same as the center line for this 3/16 punch, square hole we just punched. So what you can do is we're going to gang these guys up together, and we're going to mark on the top of the small one and drill all the way down about a half inch into the wider rail. So gang them up, and you can take your center line from the square hole and transfer it forward on both ends. And then we're going to find center, and we've done that earlier, and if you remember what we did was we just took an arbitrary, that looks like it's about halfway, turn it around and reference from the other side, and you see now we've got to make up that difference in the middle, and then we'll have dead center. There we go, that's close enough. Okay, so now I'm going to put those center lines here and here. And next I'm going to put these two together, and then we're going to move over to the drill press and drill these guys both at the same time. I'm going to set up the press to get right there in the... Okay, we're lined up there, and you do want to use a block here, because what's going to happen, a square block, that will keep these in line. And then we should be dead center, so we should be able to turn it around and do the same thing from the back side. Now that we've got these holes drilled, we're going to start measuring and trying to calculate how long the auxiliary posts are going to be. Those tenons, those mortises are going to hold them apart hopefully about 1 inch, but it may vary, so we're going to cut those to fit. Before we cut the auxiliary posts to length, and we still have it in the long lengths, let's go ahead and run the 1/8 inch round over it. That's a lot easier a lot safer and a lot easier on your fingers to run a long piece rather than the little short guys. Now we'll go ahead and test cut these guys for length. While I was at the router table, I went ahead and rounded over the corners on the legs as well, and that's an 1/8 inch. When you do go back and do the rails, be sure to have the fence in place, because if you use a handheld, right here where we have the square hole, the router is likely to dig in and leave a divot. So now we're going to make our first cut on it might be right, might be not, we don't know. We're going to make a cut and see how these guys fit together in relationship to our mortises that were cut. This is close quarters, so I'm going to use a pencil like that with the eraser down there to keep my hands out of the way. Okay, let's take this guy and see what we have. I'm going to set our rails in place. If we're lucky, we will have a good fit. And it's slightly tight. You see, it's not fitting in between there. So we're going to go ahead and make an adjustment cut and see if we can get that a little closer. Let's put these back over here. And I'm going to move this fence in just a little bit. And we're going to try that again. Get this out of the way. Now let's give this a try again and see what we have. There we are. That's right where we need. That tells us we're right when we're right up there, and we can close it up. So next what we're going to do is we're going to go back over the drill press and we're going to drill a hole dead center, width and thickness on the end of the auxiliary post all the way through, so we can put a dowel in it and assemble the large and small rails. As you can see, I've drawn in the center lines on the auxiliary post using the same method with the square that we did before, finding the center, the exact center of width and thickness. Now I'm going to take it over to the drill press and set up some stops and drill this one and the remaining ones as well. Okay. There's center that way. And here we are again, right there. Okay, I can release this guy, and we're going to drill. Okay, we've drilled it all the way through. The next step, what we're going to do, now that we've got all our joinery done for the legs and the rails, let's go ahead and sand everything up to 220 grit, and after that we're going to start some sub-assemblies. This is the first of our sub-assemblies. We're going to use these auxiliary posts to join the rails together, the narrow and the wide rails. I'm going to start by putting a little glue in the dowel hole here and inserting a dowel from both sides, using a little stick to mingle the glue in there. Get some on the other side. That should be good, and a lot of glue in there. Now I'm going to tap that guy in from that side, and then I'm going to go back and tap him in. Let's get him over there on something hard. Okay, then we're going to do the same to the other guy. I'm going to take a little bit of this, just a little bit. I don't want any ooze out, but I'm just going to get a little smidgen onto the end grain here. Not much. Spread him around just a little, trying to avoid enough that will give me ooze out. Okay, now we're going to put some glue in the dowel holes in the rails themselves. Oop. And I think I'm going to clean just up. I got just a little messy here as well. Okay. Now, take a little bit of a pusher to get that guy in and started. And one thing to keep note on is that these guys will twist right here. So once you get them in here, you want to line them up where they're parallel. That'll be your last chance. Okay. Okay, this one's looking pretty parallel, and this one needs just a little twist right like that. Okay, I've got a little bit of glue right here, but it's just a little bit, so I'm going to leave that later to take it out with a chisel once it sets up a little. Okay, let's get our clamps out. Clamp this guy, the other end. And one last little check I want to do is I want to put a square up to the end here and make sure that everything lined up as it should. And we're looking pretty good. So I think we'll set that aside, and we'll go do this with all the others, one other long one, two other short ones, and then we're going to get into our second round of glue ups, which is one of these to a set of legs. Okay, the next step in our sub-assemblies is to glue the legs up in pairs to the apron structures. We're going to start with the ends, which means we're going to, I'll show you on the bottom here. You want to have the right rear and the right front together, and make sure those arrows are pointing inward. That's going to orient everything right so you don't have, you know, a real mess up. Put that down. And also, this is your last chance to really sand the legs up really nice. I like to go ahead and finish those off at 320, the end grain. If you go at 220, it'll just go dark with the stain. 320 will still see some, you'll start to see some grain there. Also, in Greene Greene, if you notice right at the corners here where these roundovers meet, converge, I've rounded that over just a little more. I've given a little emphasis, sort of a worn look. And that's kind of typical with Greene Greene. So go ahead, if you haven't done that, round those over just a little more emphasis. I like to put some clamping pads on just to not mar things up. And we'll go ahead and start gluing up here. I'm going to put a little on there and a little on here too. Those mortises go all the way through, so if you get glue going into the other side, you may have to go back and clean that up into the opposing mortise. It's going to come in from that other side before it dries. No need to put glue on the end of that miter. I've calculated this where they're not going to touch, so we have clearance. Yep, got a little extra glue there. Okay, I'm going to wipe a little bit of that off before I have a lot of problems. Okay. Okay, this rail structure should be about 7/8 of an inch down from the top of the leg. So I've made a spacer that's exactly 7/8. I'm going to set that there and grab a little something right here and see if I'm on the money. Same thing over here. Now it's time to go ahead and clamp it up. Okay, we'll check for square. Square isn't as critical as if we had a door or a drawer in here, but I'm fairly square. So we're going to set that aside, and when we get both of these glued up, then we're going to go take the long rails and pull them together and glue them up, and then the leg rail structure will be complete. Okay, we've got the ends glued up, and now we're ready to do the big assembly. This is when my enthusiasm raises a bit. It's actually starting to look like something rather than just a bunch of parts. I've got a little bit of ooze out from the last glue up, and I'm going to pop those out with a chisel, and then we'll start putting things together. Okay, I'm going to put my clamping caul back on there. I'm going to turn this guy over and start spreading some glue. Whoa, that was messy. I got to get that off right away. This guy, not so much worried on the back side. If it oozes out, it's not going to be seen. I am on the front side. Okay, let's get some in this other one over here. Okay. Set that to the side for just a second. And I'm going to pick up one of these guys and start painting some glue on those tenons. Turn it around, get the other end. Flip it over, get this guy. Okay, set that one aside. I'm going to refresh my glue a little bit and put some glue on these tenons. Turn it around, get the other end. I'm going to get just a little bit of that off. I see that that's too close to that shoulder and it's going to cause me grief. Okay. One more little dab I need to get rid of. Okay, now let's put these guys together. It goes with that one up. Make sure you got the right side out. Over there. Okay, there we go. And let's cap it off up here. Tap it together. And then I'm going to turn it right side up and put the clamps to it. There we go. I'm not going to tighten all the way, just enough to hold the clamp, because what I want to do is I want to come back and check my margins. Okay, they're held just in place. And again, we're going to take our little spacer guy and make sure we're good there. We're good there. We're good there. We're doing pretty good. Okay, go ahead and tighten it up, and we're going to let it sit. And later we'll come back and machine the faux tenons, add the ebony pegs, and the base will be complete at that point.